This weekend, Harris and Walz are off the trail. Over the course of the last week, Donald Trump has been holding rallies in key battleground states, including Nevada and Arizona this afternoon. Arizona also where another move that could impact the election just took place. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. officially suspended his campaign this afternoon and has announced he's going to, quote, throw my support to President Trump. A source tells CNN RFK Jr. will campaign with Trump in the coming weeks. That source was talking to CNN's Kristen Holmes, who was just at the RFK Jr. event and somehow managed to teleport herself to the forthcoming Donald Trump event. Kristen, what's the Trump campaign see as the benefit in this endorsement?
Phil, they actually see quite a bit of benefit in this. They believe that this race with Kamala Harris is going to come down to razor-thin margins and that every vote counts. And they look at the polling, particularly in states like here in Arizona, in these battleground states, and they see what RFK was bringing to the table. So just to give you an example, here in Arizona, RFK was polling in recent polling at 6%. Donald Trump at 42% and Kamala Harris at 45%. Now, Donald Trump's team is not under the illusion that all 6% will go for Donald Trump now that RFK has endorsed him, but they believe that every single vote counts. And they do believe that particularly once Kamala Harris is at the top of the ticket, those votes that were being siphoned away from either candidate were actually largely coming from Donald Trump. So they believe this could be incredibly helpful. And as you mentioned, it's not just that RFK is going to be out there campaigning. He's going to be trying to reach his staunchest supporters, people who maybe were turned off by former President Donald Trump. These sources telling me that they're encouraging him to do different kinds of platforms like Tucker Carlson, like Joe Rogan, because they believe that it will help RFK reach out to those people who are still on the fence about Donald Trump and try and convince them to support the former president. So just to say that this is a big deal for them, they really believe this. They've been working on this for several weeks. Don Jr., Donald Trump's son, as well as Tucker Carlson, spearheading the conversations with RFK's team to try and make this happen, which just goes to show you the value they see here. Now, not everyone is happy with this endorsement, including RFK's own siblings, who put out a statement that read in part this, and I'm just going to read you one line. They're clearly condemning the endorsement of Donald Trump, but they also say here, our brother Bobby's decision to endorse Trump today is a betrayal of the values that our father and family hold most dear. It is a sad ending to a sad story. Clearly, again, condemning his decision to back Donald Trump. But RFK, as you said, I was at that event. He was all in for the former president.
Kristen Holmes for us in Glendale, Arizona, has been doing great reporting on this story. And also, I cannot appreciate enough the hustle getting between two campaign events. Not easy, my friends. Our thanks to Kristen. Here now is our panel of political experts to discuss. And guys, I want to talk a lot about the convention, but I want to start with you, Kristen Soltis-Anderson, because we have dueling memos. The DNC saying this changes absolutely nothing. And Tony Fabrizio, the Trump campaign's pollster, coming out saying this has a tangible effect on the race. Which is it?
I think in a race that's very close, anything that can move even a very small number of voters in a very small number of counties in the right states can matter. What I've been seeing in polling about RFK is that over the last few months, it has shifted to be more of a draw from Trump than from Biden. Initially, it was a threat to Biden because you had disaffected Democrats who loved the Kennedy name. They saw the iconography of RFK's Super Bowl ad. They really felt like, oh, I like this guy. Maybe instead of Biden, I can go with him. That's now fallen away. And instead, the voters that had been gravitating toward RFK in recent months had been those that felt like he was the real outsider. He was the one that would speak truth to power, say the offensive things other people wouldn't say. Frankly, in focus groups, people would talk about RFK Jr. like they would talk about Trump, say, 8 years ago. And so with him dropping out and endorsing Trump, it's just consolidating voters who are interested in the Trump vibe, but may have had some questions about him. I think this could give him a point or two.
Which is not nothing.
Which is not nothing.
What we know about this race. All right, I do want to talk about the convention. Christy, let me play a part of what Vice President Kamala Harris said last night as part of her case against the former president.
We know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back.
Democrats feel great. Yeah. I will grant that Democrats feel great. I think the question I had last night is that speech, which I think has been applauded by Democrats and Republicans alike, have said it was a good speech, it was well done, it was short, which was nice, got a lot in. Did it do enough to kind of convey what the Harris campaign would do to actually move the country forward?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I think it's important to take a step back and talk about just how difficult of a speech this was to give. This was her first high-profile speech of this nature on the national stage. She had to do a lot of things. She had to sort of subtly turn the page from the Biden administration, show how she's going to be a change candidate. She had to actually position herself in a way as the challenger to Donald Trump being the incumbent that we're not going to go back to. She had to appeal to this incredibly wide and diverse coalition of people. And she had to tell people not just what her policies are going to be, but sort of what her vision of America is. And I think that in a sort of Simone Biles triple-double amazing kind of way, she actually really did that and stuck the landing.
I think, okay, to that point, what was striking to me, you kind of wake up every morning, you read through the morning newsletters, and like every single headline this morning from my friends and colleagues who grinded out overnight trying to put those together is Kamala moves to the middle, Kamala's centrism. That was not how most people thought about the vice president, most based almost primarily on her 2019, 2020 campaign run. Do you think that's the case? Do you think that speech really kind of delivered that message?
It definitely delivered the message. It was kind of a reinvention of Vice President Harris. I thought what was interesting is what we didn't hear. We didn't hear her talk about banning fracking, about mandatory gun buybacks, about banning offshore drilling, about taking away private health insurance for Americans. We didn't hear any of that because those positions are wildly unpopular. And she's going to try very, very hard to distance herself from the fact that she is the sitting Vice President of the United States of America. And all of those policies are policies that she has embraced. The Biden-Harris administration took the unprecedented position of saying, we are Biden-Harris. They co-branded this administration. And then she had the position of casting 33 votes, tie-breaking votes in the Senate, more than any other vice president in the entire history of the country. So she doesn't really get to say, these aren't my positions. This isn't my administration. I'm new, I'm the outsider. I think it's really tricky to try and pull off the outsider vibe when you are currently the sitting vice president of the United States and your party's been in power for 12 of the last 16 years.
And I know it drives the Trump campaign nuts that they're trying to do this. I think on some level they've been effective, at least at this point. You've written and talked and posted on social media and Substacked constantly about the race to define at this point in time. This is the moment. She has had a clear runway for about 3.5 weeks to try and do that.
Yes.
Have they done it?
They've started to lay a really good foundation for her to be more appealing to the center than she would have been a month ago. And I think that's really remarkable. She's had to thread this needle of, I'm the person to handle the next 4 years. Please don't hold me responsible for the last 4 years. Right. And she's kind of pulling it off. When you look at polling that came out last weekend, voters were asked, how much influence do you think she's had over Biden's economic policy? And voters said not very much. How much influence do you think she's had over Biden's immigration policy? And voters said not very much, which is notable considering how much effort Republicans have put into saying, hey, she was appointed, borders are, we can, negotiate over the term. But that she really is not being held accountable by voters for an administration that was not getting very good marks from those same voters. She's been able to deftly maneuver around this, whether the Trump campaign putting hundreds and thousands of points on the board in terms of paid media to drive that message. Yeah. That could still change, but they're running out of time.
Yeah, we're going to dig into kind of what this all means for them in a little bit. But I do want to ask you, Adam Kinzinger, you were in the House for long. We're both Hill rats, and that's not a pejorative term where we come from. Adam Kinzinger giving a speech, a hawkish national security Republican in my years of covering on Capitol Hill. The vice president had kind of a hawkish defense of American exceptionalism, patriotism, national security. As a Republican who worked with Adam Kinzinger, what did you think when you saw him up there last night?
One of the things that I think that is really important to focus on is the policies, not the personalities. And that's something that they're trying really hard not to do. What Adam Kinzinger did not talk about is promoting a candidate who is for price controls. That is not a conservative Republican position to take. And so I think what we're looking at is a larger focus on the policies of these two administrations. I think will be more interesting rather than kind of who finds their way to the biggest stage.
That's what you did there. Real quick before we have to go, can they keep this? Is this durable? It's been a question I've been asking for 3.5, 4 weeks. Is this durable over the course of the next 70 plus days?
And it's an incredibly fair question, but at this point, they have been able to pull it off. Every obstacle that has been put in her path, she has been able to hurdle over it. I mean, if you look at some of the numbers, the interest and attention and excitement that she has generated has been truly unprecedented. I saw a statistic today that 2.3 million individual donors in the last month of the Harris campaign. And I don't even think that includes this past week. That means that something close to 1% of the country donated to her campaign in the past month, right? So that buys you options. That buys you the ability to not just go up on swing state television as much as you want and as much on digital. It just buys you a lot of options in terms of how you spend your time and what you get to say.
To know where the RFK Jr. vote goes.